tonight before it's too late. So the Mishnah today's Gemara is Daf Lamed Aleph 31 in Masechet Bava Metzia, and I think he's up to the Mishnah. Pretty
Yeah,
sure.
that's also where I stopped
It's a
at the
reasonable
Mishnah.
place. So the Mishnah is on
Yeah.
the bottom of Lamed Amud Bet. Says
Mhm.
the Mishnah. You ready?
Let's do it.
Ezuhu Aveda. What is an Aveda? Like, we're just going to ask. It seems like a very strange question. We've been talking about Avedot for pages, right? What do you mean, what's an Aveda? It's a thing that you find, but Gemara is going to explain. Says the Mishnah, Matzah chamaro pararo in bederach. If you find a cow or a donkey, animals that were common then, domesticated animals, grazing on the side of a road, that's inzu aveda. That's not a lost object. The person, left his donkey there, went to, I don't know, go play ball for a few hours and come back and get his donkey. If you take it, you're just making more trouble for him, not helping him. But chamar v'kelav hafuchim. But if you find the chamar who's kelav, now kelav usually refers to not the weight of not the load of a chamar, but it's like a saddle, right? So I don't know what the right word is for
Gear.
gear. Yeah, I mean that's what kelav means. But you'd have a whole apparatus. We discussed this before that you'd put on the back of a chamar that fit very exactly to that chamar's body, right? We talked about. So if that's fallen off, then clearly something has happened, right? And either it's been neglected for a long time or it got into an accident. So then it makes you worry that the owner does not know about his chamar, and therefore you should take it. Or para ratzabein akramim, when you find a para that's running in the vineyards, right? Now cows, first of all, should not be in the vineyard because they can ruin the vineyard, but they can ruin themselves, right? Because they're meant to be in the open fields. They could bump into trees and stuff and hurt themselves. So that is a concerning situation, and that is an aveda, harezu aveda. Now, continues the Mishnah on a sort of an unrelated topic. Let's say you find a person's cow running away, you return it to them, the next day it's running away again. You return it again. Says the Mishnah, afilu arba'a v'chamisha pa'amim, even if it happens many times, chayav lahachsira. You have to continuously give it back. Shavua Tov, Robert, we're in the Mishnah. So you have to give it back. Shenemar hashev tishivim. It says a double language. We think that's the limud, and that you have to keep returning it. It's not like a one-time thing or even a two-time thing. You got to keep doing this as long as and we'll see in the Gemara today, as long as you don't think he's left it on purpose, right? There are times where people throw things out in their garbage, and you come, you're like, oh, I found this beautiful thing you threw out. You must have done it by mistake, right? When it wasn't a mistake, obviously, right? So that is called aveda midat. That's where you intend to lose something, meaning you're throwing it away. Then, of course, you should not return it to that person. You should keep it or let it run. But if they have lost it, you keep returning it. Now, finally, the third aspect of our Mishnah is, let's say, hayab batel misela. Let's say you have a job. I'm going to pick I just kept thinking today about what job to pick. Let's say you tar roofs for a living. It's a hard job, I think. Not that I've done that. It sounds very hard. And you standing up there on the roof, and you see a cow running down the road. So you feel like you've got to go save the cow. But of course, going to save that cow is going to be mevatel you from your work for a half hour, and you're going to lose out on $50 a work.
More than that.
Whatever it is. Again, and it could be much longer, right? Of course, right? It could take a lot of work to capture a cow and bring it back. So you are going to miss out on a sela of work, which is a lot of money. It says the Mishnah, lo yomarlo, you can't say to the person whose avedah you went to find, tain li sela. I lost out on an hour of work. I would have made a sela. You have to pay me that amount of money. Ella notain lo scharo kipoel. The guy has to pay you. The person or the woman, whoever's object you found has to pay you, but it has to be like a poel. And the Gemara, it's a little bit of debate about what word to use here, but I think the understanding is not the word is that poel meaning like an unskilled worker. Right? Meaning that it takes a lot less skill and training to run after a cow, I guess, than to tar a roof, right? And so you don't get paid back as the high skilled job that you missed. You get paid back for a lower skilled job on the assumption that, look, everyone who's doing a very difficult job wouldn't mind taking a break from that job and saying, take an hour off of your really hard work and do something easier, and we'll pay you for the easier job. But because you basically did an easier job when you went to return the Avedah, you only get paid for that. Now, let's say you don't want that situation. You're like, I need the money, right? I'm willing to do the harder job. So im yesh sham beit din. Now, if there is a court there, beit din, matneh b'fnei beit din, you can make a t'nai in front of the beit din and say, look, I really want to do my job of tarring my roof. I need the $100. This guy's cow's running away. He's going to want me to save his cow. I'm only going to go save it if he'll pay me the $100. And then as long as you do that in front of Beit Din, the guy has to pay you the $100.
So annoying.
So of course, remember we talked about this earlier. It has to, of course, be where the Aveda is worth $100, right? You shouldn't go if it's worth less than that. But the point is that you made your intention clear to Beit Din that this is important to you and you're going on that condition. You can't do it after the fact, right? You can't say afterwards, oh, I would have loved to keep working. I missed my $100. And im ein sham Beit Din, b'fnei mi yatneh, if there is no Beit Din, and so therefore you're legitimately worried that if you stop your job to go return this Avedah, you're going to lose money, then shelo kodem, then you don't have to return it. Because since you are going to be losing out, you don't have to lose out in order to return this thing. So that's our Mishnah. We're going to discuss this, of course, in the Gemara. Says the Gemara, just the first part of the Mishnah. Atu kol kihani damrina lav avedah. What do you mean? Everything we've talked about till now is not avedah. What do you mean? What's an avedah? Like, where are you starting from? Amar Rav Yehuda, no, hachikam. This is what the Mishnah is saying. Ezehi klal avedah. Right? We know we've talked about avedot, but give us some principles. How do you determine whether something is lost or something is just there, right? Shehu chayav ba. So now our Mishnah gives some examples. Matzah chamaru para ro'im baderech. We're 5 lines from the bottom. Or if you find a donkey or a cow grazing on the side of the road, ein zo avedah. Even if you don't find any owner anywhere nearby, there's nothing designating them. Someone left them there and they're taking a nap, under the tree a few blocks away. V'lo mechayev ba. You should not return it. Chamar v'kelev hafuchim. But if you find the chamar that it's upended, and its gear is on the road, and parav ratzah ben akramim, or a cow is running between the vineyards, arezu aveda umechayav bo. Ask the Gemara ul olam. And again, is this true forever? And the question is, if you find the cow that's grazing, that's really nice, and it's sitting there for a few hours, what if you go back tomorrow and the cow is still grazing there? Or the next day, right? It looks very comfortable, but maybe this cow should have an owner. So shouldn't that indicate something? Amar Yehuda Marav, yeah, ad shlosha yamim, up till 3 days. If it's still there more than 3 days, then you get nervous that the person lost it and left it, and you should reclaim it and try to find the owner. Says Gemara, 1 second. Echidami, 2 lines on the bottom. Ibele luta, if you see it there at night, no animal should be out at night. It's dangerous. There's other animals will attack it. It's lost. Then afilu chadashat anami, even 1 time, right? 1 hour. Ibiyamama, if you see it during the day, maybe this guy leaves his cow here every day when he goes to, I don't know, play basketball, right? So who knows? Why can't it be more than 3 days and not be an Aveda? Afilo tuva namilo. Says more. You see this cow there early in the day and late in the day. So maybe you walk by on your way to shul, right? And you see this cow there early in the morning and late in the evening, not at night, not when it's dark, but in the early hours. You don't know if it was there all day, of course. You didn't sit there and watch it. But it starts getting suspicious, right? If you see it there a few days in a row, so that's where Tlata Yume, if it's 3 days, then you say Amrina Netrume Etramila, right? Vinafka. It just happens to be that this person left it there, but it's not lost. Tvei, if it's more than that, Vade Avedahi, if it's more than 3 days, then it seems like it's definitely lost. The guy has no idea where his cow is. He's never coming to get it back, and your job is to reclaim it and announce, as we had in the last Mishnah, about, I found something and help the person get it back. Tainami Hachim, we have a Braita that speaks this out as well. Matzah talit v'kardom, right? If you find now not animals, you find a talit, a jacket, or a kardom, or a hoe in Asratia, which Asratia, we had Sratia and Platia. Sratia is like the sideway leading up to the main street, right? The main road. Meaning it's a public place, but it's a paved, it's not a wild place, but it's, not where a person would generally leave their stuff, right? It's like middle of 5th Avenue, let's say, right? Or you find a para ratzabin akramim, or a cow running between the vineyards, harizu aveda, that's, clearly not where a person meant to leave their thing. You should pick it up and take it and return it. Talit b'tzad geder, but if you find, in like a private place, you find a fence, and at the bottom of the fence, someone left their talis, right? Or again, talis in this case means a coat usually, right? Or a kardon b'tzad geder, they leave their hoe there. Or you find a para ro'eh bein rash, whoever, the Gra here changes this to bein asavim. So not to get into the question of kramim, which we'll get to later, but you find a cow that's just grazing on the side of the road, like our Mishnah, ein zu aveda. None of this is Avedah because you assume the person put down his jacket, he folded it up, he hoped no one would take it, right? And he's going to come back for it. And by you taking it, you're just making more problems because then he's got to find you, et cetera, as we had earlier. So that is the Braita. Continues the Braita, the fourth line from the top. Gimul yamim, shlosha yamim zachar zeh. If this happens 3 days in a row, harizu Avedah. Then it is an Avedah because even something that you found there shouldn't be there forever, right? If you see that jacket by the side of the bus stop, one day is one thing. 4 days in a row already, it's probably lost. Ra'ah. Now, says the Braita, one last case, which is actually opens up a whole new understanding of Avedah. Ra'ah mayim sheshotvim uba'im. Right? Let's say, remember, we think of Avedah usually as something that you lose. But this is a case where you are going to lose it, right? You see water that's rushing and about to come and destroy your property, right? Someone's property. So it hasn't been lost yet, but that's an Avedah also, because if you do nothing, the water is going to overtake the property and ruin the tomatoes, and there's going to be nothing there. So says the Braita, Harezeh goder bifneim. You have a responsibility to put up a fence to redirect them away from his property, hopefully not onto someone else's property, right? But you have a responsibility to help save this person's possession. And that's part of the mitzvah of Shabbat Avedah, right? That you have to save something that would otherwise be destroyed. Now, Amar Rava said, Rashi says this is unrelated in terms of his statement, but we'll see the connection. It says in the pasuk, the kol avedat achicha, that, remember, it's a very redundant pasuk. I don't have it in front of me, Rosa does. You know, if you find this, if you find that, if you find any avedat achicha, you should return it. So what does the words any avedat achicha come to include? Says Rava, a shocking addition, the rabot avedat karka. It includes not just things that are lost, but losing land. Now, of course, your land can't walk up and go away, right? But it can be destroyed, right? So if something is coming, if there's water coming, or if there's a meteorite coming, and it's going to destroy someone's land, you have an obligation to try to save it. I guess not killing yourself, but try to save it, right? So that includes karka. Now, Amalei of Chananya, the Rava, so Rav Chananya said to Rava, Tanya to Masayelach. The Braita seems to support what you just said. Because the Braita says, now he's quoting this Braita, Ra'a mayim sheshotvim ba'im. You see water coming, then harezeh goder b'fneim, you should set up a fence. So presumably, you are protecting the land from being flooded. Amalei, Rava said, well, that doesn't really prove my contention. Because imi shumha lo tisayeya. This is not necessarily going to prove what I said, because it could be referring to the stuff growing on the land, right? You're not trying to protect the land from the water, you're protecting the tomatoes on the land. There's things standing, there's crops on the land. So they're going to be ruined. The trees are all going to be ruined, not necessarily the land is going to be ruined. Says Gemara, said, I guess, with Chananya back to Rava, Ika omrim, what if there's trees there, right? If there's tomatoes, so what's the chiddush that you have to save them, right? Meaning if the Braita was telling me that you have to save land, then it would be telling us something innovative. But the fact that it's just saying you have to save someone's tomatoes, everyone knows that. It says, it's not necessarily the case. These are things that are still not independent, right? They need the land, meaning they wouldn't live on their own. They're not mature tomatoes. They're immature things. And you might have thought, you might have thought that because they need the land, they are like the land. And therefore, if you don't have to protect land, you don't have to protect them either. Kamashman and the Braita potentially that, oh, you have to protect these things, but it doesn't prove that you have to protect the land. Now, of course, Rava says, I hold you do have to protect the land. But don't prove it from this Braita, because a Braita might only be telling you that you have to protect the things growing on the field, even if they're very immature. So you just can't prove it. Rava, of course, still maintains the halacha, and it's something we're going to discuss further. Continues the Gemara back to the second part of the Mishnah. Well, it's not actually the second part. The first part, it said you find a chamar upara that are grazing on the side of the road, you have to leave them. If you find them running in the vineyards, you've got to save them. Now, of course, by setting up 2 conditions for leaving them and 2 for saving them, you left all the space in the middle, right? So meaning it says if they're grazing, which seems to be a domestic or, a safe thing as opposed to running. And it says in the side of the road, in the field, as opposed to a vineyard, right? And in a vineyard, of course, an animal can both hurt itself by bumping up against things, especially if it's running. And second of all, it can cause damage to the vineyard, right? So says the Gemara, how do you reconcile that? You can't talk about the extremes and say you have to leave it if it's got these 2 in its favor and save it if it's got 2 in its disfavor. What if it's only 1? So that's, of course, the standard question of the Gemara. It's a great Gemara. Hagufa kasha, right? This itself, the Mishnah is itself a contradiction. Because Amr, first you said Matzah chamaro para ro'in b'derech inzu aveda, implying that it's only because they're doing two things. They're ro'eh, so they're not running, and they're in the road, not in the vineyard. Ro'in b'derech hu d'lo have aveda. Ha-ratza b'derech, if it was running in the road, or it was ro'eh ben akramim, or it was grazing, but in a vineyard, then have aveda. Then it would be an aveda, right? That would be something that you expect is lost, and you'd have to save it. But Ema Seifa, if you look at the next case, it says the opposite. It says Chamor v'kelav hafuchim and para uratza ben akramim. If you have an animal that's running in the vineyards, harezu aveda. Again, the implication is the opposite. Ratza ben akramim hu aveda. It's running and it's in a vineyard. Haratza b'derech. If it was running on a road, it would be an aveda. And ro'eh ben akramim. Even if it was grazing, but in the vineyard, it would also be. I'm sorry, einzu aveda. Right? It's only an aveda if it's both are negative, but not only one of them. Amar Abaye said Abaye, well, you've got to think about this Mishnah with the pasuk in Iyov of Yagid alav re'o. A person is, or a thing is informed by its friends, who the company it keeps, right? Meaning, read the Mishnah adjacent to the case. Tana, what you should read in the Mishnah is, the Tana taught you, ro'eh b'derech l'havi aveda. If it's grazing in the road, it's not considered aveda. That's what our Mishnah said. V'hu adin ro'eh ben akramim. The key thing is not the location, it's the act. If the animal is ro'eh, then it's not considered an aveda. But Tana ratza ben akramim, then the Tana said if it's running ben akramim, that is have aveda. And the same thing would be true if it's running down the street. The same thing would be if a cow is running down Broadway, it's also a aveda, meaning don't make this kind of drasha from the Mishnah. The most important thing is the behavior of the animal. If it's ratza, then it's an aveda, and if it's ro'eh, it's not an aveda. Amalei Rava said, Rava, well, that's very possible, but then the Mishnah should have said something different. Right? If the Mishnah is there to tell you from context, then litni kilta v'koshkin chamirta. Tell me the one that's easier, lighter, right? Meaning more logical, I guess. And I would know koshikin, the one that's more chamor. Meaning, litni the following. Say ratza b'derech, that if you're running down the road, have aveda, and then I'll know for sure if it's running in a vineyard, koshkin ratza ben akramim, and teach me litni ro'eh ben akramim, if you're grazing in a vineyard, you're not an aveda, and then I'll know for sure if you're grazing in the road. Dilo have aveda, koshkin ro'eh b'derech. Ela Amar Rava says, Rava, the reality is that ratza lo kasha. Our Mishnah does leave this ambiguous. It says if it's running in the road, if it's grazing in the road, it's not an aveda. And if it's running in the vineyard, it is an aveda. What if it's running in the road? The reality is that it's ambiguous because sometimes it's an aveda and sometimes it's not. It says Rava, ha da'apa legabe dabra, ha da'apa legabe mata. It depends which way it's running, right? If the cow is running away from the city, then that's an aveda because by the time the owner catches up to its cow, it's going to be 2 days away. You know what I mean? You're going 20 miles down the road and you're never going to find it again. But if it's running towards the city, then, although it's not normal behavior for a cow to run, it's not running further away from where the owner presumably will be, and you don't have to stop it and protect it, okay? And ro'eh nami l'kasha, when you think about grazing, so the Mishnah again said, if it's ro'eh ben akramim, it's an aveda, implying that, if it's ro'eh in the derech, it's not an aveda, right? And if it's running in the karim, it is, and we weren't sure if it's grazing in the karim, is it an aveda or not? Says that Rava, it depends also. Kam be'avedat kufa, kam ba'avedat karka. It depends on whether you're thinking about that. Remember, when an animal is grazing in a vineyard, right? There's two possible losses here. The animal could be damaged by rubbing up against the trees and hurting itself, and the vineyard could be damaged. So one part of the Mishnah is worried about the aveda of the guf of the animal, and one is worried about the aveda of the vineyard, right? The karka. So what Kikatani says the Gemara ro'eh bet derech, when we said, that when you're ro'eh in the road, lo have aveda, that's not considered to be a lost animal, implying that if you're ro'eh ben akramim, it is an aveda. That's because we're worried about the animal damaging the karim, right? That's avedat karka. That's because the animal's damaging the karim, not because the animal's damaging itself. And you have to therefore take the animal away to protect the bala karim. And kikatani ratza ben akramim aveda, but when the Mishnah says that when it's running, it's an aveda, implying that it's only running. But if it is ro'eh ben akramim lo aveda, that's referring to avedat kufa, meaning you're worried about the cow. When the cow is running in a vineyard, it's going to hurt itself. It's going to bang against trees. But if the cow is just standing in the vineyard eating away, it's going to cause damage to the vineyard, but it's not going to cause damage to itself, right? The ratzah ben akramim misakfa. If it's running between the karim, it injures itself. It gets a wound. And ro'eh ben akramim lo misakfa. But if it's ro'eh, it doesn't get a wound, right? So therefore, the Mishnah says, don't worry about it. The animal's just grazing there. It's not going to get hurt. Says the Gemara, okay, it's very nice for the animal. But what about the owner of the karim, right? The animal's not going to get hurt, but it's going to cause damage. So Nahi, the case where it's grazing in the vineyard, Nihi delo misakva, so great for the animal, it's not going to get injured. But typically, Mishum Abidat Karka, but why don't you at least say that you are not allowed to do that because you're ruining the land? Enters the Gemara, it's where land where you're not worried about. Dekuti, it's talking about a non-Jewish land where you don't have to worry. Or Hefker land, let's say, which would be nicer, right? So you don't have to worry about the loss. So this is 1 second. It's one thing to say you don't have to worry about the loss because we don't worry about Avedah, etc. Hakuti. But presumably the guy who owns this land, the Kuti, is going to get a shotgun and come and shoot the cow that's ruining his karim. And then you're going to have to worry about the cow, right? Typically, Mishum Avedah Gufa. Why aren't you worried about the cow? The Dilma Katlalach. The guy's going to kill the cow. Right, so you're not sure. You don't have to end up paying, but you're causing a lot of trouble. This is a very civilized place. They don't shoot at the first offense. They would warn the owner and say, "We saw your cow in our vineyard," and that gives the guy a chance to protect his cow. Says, "Well, okay, but maybe this happened yesterday, right? Maybe this cow was already there once, and he's got a warning, and this is day 2, right? Dilma Atruba, he already warned him." Well, then already you're free. Because if the owner of the karim warned this owner of the cow and said, look, if your cow ever comes back on my property, I'm shooting it, and he wasn't careful to prevent that, that's his problem. Then vadai aveda midatu, it is considered to be intentionally losing it, and you don't have to go and save his animal. Okay, which is very complicated. Yeah. So that is interesting. That is a different concept, right? Vadai aveda midati. Therefore, that is not something you'd have to worry about. And so you don't have to save the cow if it's grazing in a vineyard, right? You do have to worry about the of the vineyard's owner if it was a Jew and you had to protect them. Continues the Gemara. We are 3 lines to the last of the middle lines at the 2 dots. The Mishnah said, Hichziro barcha. The animal, you give it back, it runs away again, gives it back, it runs away again. You have to keep returning it, even 100 times, right? Well, Mishnah said 4 or 5. Even 4 or 5 times. So Amalei Humi Rabbanan the Rava, one of the students said to, one of the rabbis actually said to Rava, Ema, how do you know it's 100 times? You presumably learn this from the pasuk. It says Hashev Tishivim. It says Hashev Tishivim, right? So why don't you say Hashev means Chadazimna, you return something 1 time, Tishivim, Trezimni, twice. But how do you got to do it 5 times or 50 times? Amalei said, no, you misunderstood. The way we know you do it multiple times is not from the double language of Hashev Tishivim. Hashev, the word return means return without questions, even 100 times, right? Hashev is open. It's not saying once. Hashev, you should return his thing. What does the word Tishivim tell you? I'll read that inside. Amalei, Hashev afilu mea pamim mashma. Tishivim tells you a whole separate halacha. Because ainli ela lebeito leginat lebeito. Right? You only know that if you return something, the way to return something is return it to his house. How do you can return something leginato, the chorvato minayin? You can return something to somebody's field, his garden, his chorva, meaning his destroyed, the outhouse, basically. Talmud Omer tishivein. That mikomakom. Any way you return something to someone, you fulfilled your responsibility. So that's 1 second. What do you mean you returned it to his field? If the field is protected, right? It's surrounded. Then Pshita, of course, returning there is like returning to his house. Italo mintra, if it's not protected, then I'm mine. Why is it returning it? You just threw it in a public place where someone's going to get it, basically. Olam de mintra. No. It is protected. But the chiddush of is not that it's returning it, their accounts, it's returning it. You don't have to tell him about it. You can take it and throw it over his fence and you've fulfilled your obligation, right? Rebbe Elazar said, Rebbe Elazar said, Hakol trichim dat ba'alim. Anything that you return, we had this in Bava Kama, if you recall, that if you steal something from someone, you can't, let's say you steal $100 from someone, you feel really guilty about it. You can't just put it in a mailbox and walk away. We talked about this extensively above a comma.
Yep.
You have to tell them about it, right? And you don't fulfill your responsibility until you tell them. Now, $100 is a bad example because it's not, money's a little different. But the Gemara really talked about objects because you said the person who got it is not protecting it like it's their own because they don't know they own it. So you have to always inform someone if you were giving them back something you stole or took from them. But chutz me'ashavat aveda, except ashavat aveda, when you return an aveda, you don't have to tell them. You don't have to inform them who you are. You don't even have to tell them you did it. You fulfilled your responsibility by putting back into their house. Shat Torah ribta shavot harbe, because the Torah says hashev teshivim. Okay. Continues the Gemara. We're going to go through for the rest of this page all the other double languages, not all of them, but many of the other double languages in the Torah. It says shalach tishalach imal abanim, right? Send off a mother bird. Don't take the mother bird if she's sitting on top of her chicks. Okay. Ema. So now, what does that refer to? Maybe you'd think it says shalach chadazim. Like, do it once. Tishalach, do it twice. But after 2 times, you don't have to send off the mother anymore. You can take her, right? Amarle. So he said back to him, no, that's not what it means. This is again the student to Rava, right? Shalach means afilu me'apamim. You always have to send away. You can never take the mother bird if she's on her chicks. Okay, but what is the second language? What's the repetition? Tishalach ein li ela devar reshut. I would only know that if, let's say, you want to take the mother bird because you're hungry, you want to have lunch, right? But ledvar mitzvah minayin. What if you want her because you need to bring a karban, right? So you might have thought there you're permitted to do it. Tamalomar, you cannot. Tishalach mikom makom. Never take that mother on her when she's with her children. Another Rabbanan said to Rava, what about the following pasuk? It says, Hocheach tochiach et amatecha. Give rebuke, right, to someone. So maybe Hocheach means once, Tochiach chadazim, and Tochiach means trezimni, and you don't have to do it more than twice, right? These are all questions. You don't have to do it more times. Amalei again, Hocheach means open-ended. Afilu me'apamim. If someone's doing something wrong, tell them over and over and over, like parents will do to their children, right? Mashma. Tochiach tells you, Ainli Ella Harav the Talmid. You would have only known that it means like a superior, someone whose job it is to give someone else, direction. But how do you know Talmid the Rav Minayin? That even a student or an inferior, in teaching should tell their teacher something if they did it wrong. In any case, you should, again, respectfully, of course, but you should give tochacha in any circumstance. Okay. The next case that we're going to go through is Azov Tazov Imo. The Torah says if you see someone is going down the road, he's falling, his wares are falling, you should help. Azov Tazov. Again, it's a double language. Says the Gemara, Ein li ela ba'alav imo. I only know that is if the owners are with it. It says Azov Tazov Imo. She'ein ba'alav imo minayin. How do you supposed to help the animal even if the owners are not there? Talmud Lomar Azov Tazov Mikom Makom. Okay, another pasuk says Hakem Takem Imo. This is referring to an animal's fallen down. This is called te'ina, right? You should help the animal get up. So you should do it in both cases. So ask the Gemara, why do you need psukim in both cases, right? Lamali michtav prika, lamali michtav te'ina. Why do you need a pasuk by talking about where you're unloading the animal because the animal's crushed under its load? Right, and so you help get it off the animal. And another passage where you need to help load the animal, right? Ti'ina says the Gemara because you need both psukim. If you only said by the case of prika, I would have thought havamina mishum di'ikatzar balechayim. There you've got to help because the animal's falling under its load. If you don't help it, it's going to get hurt, right? So you have to help protect it. And of course, the animal's going to die or going to get damaged or wound itself because it's falling under the load. So you have to help. But helping a person load up their animal, right? The animal's not under pain. It said nothing's going to get damaged in this case. Maybe you don't have to help. Okay, so the Torah said you do. If the Torah only told you have to help, that's mishum de bischar. We're going to learn out, we're going to discuss this more later, actually tomorrow, that the person is supposed to pay you or can pay you when you help them. You have to help them, but they have to pay you. So therefore, that might be where you help because you're getting paid. But if they're not paying you, like the case of unloading the animal, maybe you don't have to help if the owner's not there. So therefore, you need both psukim to tell you in all cases. As the Gemara, Rabbi Shimon, who we're going to quote tomorrow, Damar aftina b'chinam, that in fact Rabbi Shimon says you don't get paid for anything. So what's the chiddush then? Ma'ikil meimar says, well, you're right. We don't need both psukim. But the problem is that if you don't tell two psukim, you don't know which one is telling you what, right? Rabbi Shimon, lo misai mikra, the psukim are not clear about which one is referring to unloading, which one's referring to loading. And so it's true, if you just said you have to help him load, I would have known you also have to help him unload. But if you only had one pasuk, I would have applied it to unloading, not to loading. So therefore, we can't have one pasuk. Okay. Ask the Gemara, Lama the Michtav Hanitarti, Lama Michtav Aveda. Why do you need the two teachings? One is that if you see a person's animal falling, help them. And if you see a person's cow running away, help them, right? Those are basically the same principle, which is a person's losing money, you should help out. Says the Gemara, Tzricha. I would have thought 1 second. Here, the owner is standing next to his thing falling down, or his time being wasted because he can't load up his animal, and therefore, Mishum de Tzara Demara Ita, there's pain of the owner, right? Because he's not getting money for what he's supposed to do. Tzara Dida Ita, and you also have Tzara of the animal in the case where it's falling down. Aveda, right? But something that ran away, the cow's running away, the owner doesn't know its cow ran away. So Tzara Demara Ita, but the owner is going to lose money eventually because he's going to lose his cow. But Tzara Didaleta, but there's no Tzara in the thing. So Amalo, you might not have to help. Therefore, I would have thought, therefore, Kamash Balan. Veda, and if you only told me you have to help a person when their object is lost, I would have thought Misham Deleta Lamara Bahada. That's because the owner's not here, right? So they can't help themselves. Turn the page. Avahani Tarti, but the cases of animals that are being loaded or unloaded, the owner's right there. He just can't do it himself. But he can hire somebody, right? Let him pull out his cash, his checkbook. Right? Why is it your responsibility? Maybe you don't need to help him without pay, right? Or without a mitzvah. Maybe he's got to pay up. Tzricha, and the chiddush is that you do have to help him. Right? Now, again, we're going to see tomorrow that he might have to pay you back in one case. But it does, even if he has to pay you back, you still have to do it. It's not like you are like, I don't feel like doing it, I don't want the money. Right? You have to help someone who you see is broken down, which really gets into very interesting halachic questions of whether you're supposed to stop for a car, on the side of the highway. So, because really, whatever. I mean, it's not something the Gemara talks about. I could be clear, but it's a very practical question.
There's a law in France that if you don't stop to help out someone who's in danger, then you're liable.
Right. It's fascinating.
Non-assistance to person in danger is what it's called.
But then everyone's like helping everyone.
Wow.
So yeah, everyone's helping everyone. It's great.
No, but that's
France is
there are
amazing.
too many people.
France is a better country than the United States.
Okay, continues the Gemara, the second line. Mot yumat. Now that we're speaking about fun, the Torah says if someone hurts somebody else, you kill them. Hamaket. Now, we're dashing the two words, mot yumat. Ainli ela b'mitak tuvabo, where we learn, doesn't say it, but we learn out in Sanhedrin that the way you kill a murderer is with chenek, is with strangling them, right? Ainli ela b'mitak tuva. I'm sorry, I take it wrong. It's sahif. You use a sword, right? Ainli ela mitak tuvaba. You can only do the mita the Torah says about them, which is a knife, right? A sword. How do you know that if you can't kill them that way? How think of an example, Rosa, when you couldn't kill someone with a sword? Rashi says you caught him on a boat. You have no sword, right? So you don't have a sword.
I'm not that
You can kill him anyway. You can throw him overboard, throw him to the sharks. You kill them any way you can. If you can't do the ideal way, do another way. Okay. Then it says haket taket. It's a similar thing, right? You hit them. Lefi cherev is what the pasuk says in that case, right? This is talking about a city in Irani Dachat, right? So ainli ela behaka'ak tuvaba. I only know you can punish them with the sword, like the Torah says. You kill them in any way. Mikol makom. Hashev tashiv, right? This is getting back to not the case of hashavat aveda, but the case of where you take possession of something. Remember, you get a loan from someone. You lend someone money, they give you an object as a guarantee, you have to return it to them when they need it, right? The Torah says. So what is the Hashev Tashiv? Only know if you got a mashkon, a surety, through Beit Din. So there you have to return it because Beit Din will guarantee you'll get it back. If you did it privately and you're nervous, and if you give them back their bed or their pillow, right? They're never going to give it back to you. How do you know you still have to give it back to them? Talmud Lomar, you have to. Hashev tashev mikol makom. Okay, it says chavol tachbol, which is similar, talking about where you borrowed, you took the clothing from someone, they have to give it back to you. In the Yalash Mishkano Bereshut, I only know if you got a mashkin with Bereshut Beitin. Mishkano Shelo Bereshut Minayin. Talmud Lomar chavol tachbol mikol makom. Says where it seems like it's very redundant, right? You just said Hashev tashev, and you said chabol tachbol, which both tell you that if you lend money to someone and they give you an object to guarantee it, you have to give it back to them when they need it. So why do you have two psukim? Hani trei kroi lamali. Well, chad liksut yom, chad liksut laila. And this is a Gemara we're going to have later, all the way at the end of the Masechet, that one telling you that it's an object that they use during the day, and one is an object of night. And the Gemara is going to say that at the night you thought maybe it's not sniut or it's not kavod to go in, but even so, you have to get your thing and give it back. Patoach tiftach, right? Torah says, beautiful pasuk in Dvarim, in Re'eh, open your hand up and give money to charity. Why does it say patoach tiftach? Why does it say a double language? Because I would have only known you give charity to people who are local to you. How do you have to give charity to people who are poor in other cities? If you have the ability, right, there might be a precedence to people in your city, but you've got to give charity to people even in other places. Okay, naton titain, which also refers to giving charity. Why does it say double language? Because you might have only thought, this is a very fascinating Gemara. You might have only thought, look, if you have a lot of money to give a lot of money. What if you only give a tiny bit? Then maybe that's not such a big, no, I'm not sure what the maybe is, right? Maybe there's no point in giving, or maybe you don't have a responsibility to share if you only have a little bit to give. But if you can matanamu etet minayin, how do I know that you have to give even if you only can give a little bit? Anything you can give is a mitzvah to give. Okay, then it says ha'anik tanik. Remember the mitzvah of hanaka, which is a very interesting mitzvah that we discussed in Kiddushin, is the mitzvah of the Torah. It's a very specific pasuk that when you free your eved, right, you're supposed to give them a gift on the way out. Right? We had a whole discussion about, is it a fixed amount? Is it per year? Is it, something? But you have to give a goodbye bonus. I don't know what they call it nowadays. What do they call it?
Parting.
It has a name.
I don't know.
Not for avadim, but
A severance pay.
thank you. Severance sounds good, right? But so thank you. But that's what I'm looking for. But that's obviously not exactly the thing because you're not firing them. They finished their job. But you have to it's required to do it, right? But remember, the pasuk says, Rose has got the pasuk here, which we're going to find. Hanik tanik lo mitzoncham yergancham yakvecha asher berachecha Hashem lokecha titein lo. Why? Because it's actually a longer pasuk, but because Hashem blessed you. Says the Gemara, ainli elashint berich habayit biglalo manikim. Right? I only know if, let's say, this person was good for the house, meaning your stocks, not your stocks, your fields got improved when you had the slave, things got better, that then you have to give a severance money. But let's say you had terrible time, right? Everything went bad when this person was working for you. How do you know that you still have to give them a severance? Talmud Lomer, hanik tanik mikol makom, right? You have to give it to them. They tried, they got to give it to them no matter what. Asking more Lord Belazar ben Azariah, we had in Kiddushin, who said, if in fact this guy improved your house, you have to give him a hanaka, a gift, when he leaves. But so then why do you need the double language? What is ha'anik ta'anik lamali? And answers the Gemara here, Dibra Torah lashon b'nei Adam. You know what? Sometimes it just says it twice for no reason.
Are you joking?
This of course is bothered. He's like, so why do we have this whole Gemara, right, of Dibra Torah lashon b'nei Adam, if sometimes that's what it means? And Tosfos says it's not always the case. Anyways, but it is a challenging answer here at the end of the Gemara. Continues the Gemara, ha'avet tavitenu, right? This was something we discussed as well, right? You have to give charity to a person. What's the pasuk? That's the pasuk I just read. Sorry.
Yeah.
Where is it? What's the pasuk again? Sorry, pasuk 5. This is Dvarim Tet Vav Chet, right? So it says, Ki patach tiftach et yadcha lo. You should open your hand up for a poor person. V'ha'avet tavitenu de machsaro asher yachsar lo. Give them sustenance for the things that they need. So why is it a double language? Says the Gemara, Ein li ela she'ein lo ve'eino rotzeh litparnes. It's only I would have only known if a person has no money, right? So they need your money, but they don't want to take your charity, which we said you're supposed to give. You should give them a loan, right? So you have a requirement to loan them money so that they can take it, so they can keep eating, right? So that's where Amar Rachmana Tein Lo Derech Halva. There the Torah says give them a loan. But what if Yeshlo, let's say a person has money, but they don't want to spend it on their children, right? So their kids are starving and the parent has money. How do we know that you also have responsibility to lend them money? When the father dies, you can recollect from the estate. But how do you know that even in that case, you have a responsibility to do it, minayin, or let's say the father is away, right? You can't access the money. That, even in that case, even if there's money there, but they can't access it, you have to lend them money in order for them to eat. Asking whether Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Shimon said, we had this going to both. Yeshlo ve'eno rotzeh parnes enis kakin lo. In fact, you don't have to. That if the family has money, but the patriarch or whoever's in charge of the money does not want to spend it, you don't have a responsibility to go and lend them additional money and then collect it back from the state. Tabitenu lamali. So again, again, the answer is that in some cases we don't have a good explanation, and adam, and that is why. One more, let's do a couple more lines. We're at the first of the wide lines. The Mishnah said, Hayabatel min hasela. Let's say in order to return this Avedah, you have to stop your job in which you would have earned $100. So okay, sell is not $100, but I'm going to say $100. Lo yomarlo, you shouldn't say to the person who lost the cow, here's your cow, tein li sela, ela notein lo scharo kipoel. He pays you like a worker. Now, Tana, we learned in a Braita, notein lo scharo kipoel batel. They give you payment like a poel who's doing nothing, which is why they take out the word batel, of course, in the Mishnah, right? Now, says the Gemara, what do you mean like a poel who's doing nothing? You weren't doing, remember, we've discussed before the lowest job, the cheapest job that even a person who's got no arms and legs, as we talked about, is a shomer kishuin. Very good, Rosa. Is someone, who watches the vegetable garden, right? Because you're a scarecrow, basically, right? So you don't need any intelligence. You don't need any physical, really, attributes. You just are there and your presence has some benefit. But of course, you get paid very little for that job, right? It's a very unskilled job. So that is a very low pay. But running after someone's cow and corralling a cow and returning it does not seem to me to be low, a low stakes job. Not something I've ever done, but it certainly takes some effort, right? So what do you mean? Says somewhere, why is it my kipoel batel? Rabbi, no, it doesn't mean a poel who's doing nothing. It means kipoel batel she'oto melacha she'debatel mina. It means like a poel who's doing the work of returning a cow and taking a break from finishing off the roofs or whatever the hard job you were doing. So meaning you get less than your professional job, right? Which would have taken more effort and paid you more, and you get paid like a person who's running after cows, whatever that job would be. So they have to pay you the lower, you basically get paid for your effort. So even if you have a job that you are missing that pays you more, you get paid the lower amount. As we're going to see tomorrow again, if you don't want to stop doing your job and you make a t'nai in front of Beit Din, then you have to get paid the full price of your job. Or maybe Beit Din would say, maybe it's a bad idea for you to go do this. You're going to cost more money for the guy than benefit. He probably wouldn't want you to do it. So we'll see it tomorrow a little bit. So we'll pick it up tomorrow at the 3 dots on the bottom. I don't know what time we're learning tomorrow. Miriam's vote is the evening, I'm guessing.
For tomorrow, yes.
Can everyone do 7 p.m. or 7:30 p.m. or sometime?
I probably can't, but
What time is mincha? It's probably later, right? It's like 7:45.
Let me look it up.
No, it's not. It's like 7. It's like 7:15 maybe.
if I miss it, I'll catch up on a recording.
Yeah, but I want to see what works.
I
Charlie,
think
Charlie,
it's at 7:10.
7:10.
So 7 or 7:30, neither of those are going to work. We'd have to do like 8
What about
o'clock.
6? What about 6:30 and we'll finish by mincha? Can that work for you, Miriam? So let's see if it works for Charlie. 'Cause we don't have
That's
any
not
minutes
going to
on.
work for me.
It's not going to work. And 7:45 a.m. would?
It would, but it sounds like it's not going to work for Miriam.
This is
No,
AM.
7:45 is fine. Oh, AM I
AM,
can't.
Can you do any time in the morning, Miriam, or your classes?
My class is until 10:15, so
Oh.
anytime after that.
Before it
It's
was.
it's a 3-hour class, so
I could do 10:30.
AM?
Yeah, that actually would work better for me than the evening.
Yeah, but don't-
I'm not worried about you. Miriam, that would work for you? Should we try? Let's get very good.
Robert, can you do that?
For me, it won't, but you really have to do what's best for Riverdale.
I
From
love
my-
Robert's
I don't know if I
answer.
should interfere. But if I miss it, I'll catch up on a recording, but no, I have a family of matters.
No, I understand. We're not.
But I could do 8 o'clock at night, and I could do any time in the morning.
What do you think you should do, Miriam?
Whatever you want. I mean, I can do 8 o'clock at night also. Robert, is there any time that actually works for you?
Besides 7:45 AM.
Okay, we'll try for 8 PM. If I'm there, I'm there. If I'm not, I'll get the recording later.
Okay,
All right, we're gonna try 8 PM.
Sounds like a plan.
Okay,
Sounds like a plan.
all right,
Um,
great.
And I hope it works out.
Thank you.
Okay, everyone. Shavua Tov. I'll see you tomorrow.
Shavua Tov.
Tov.